we set out to provide people with knowledge and tools and an experience of working with each other so that when relationships hit a bump in the road, as they inevitably will, they have something to fall back on.
Hello and welcome to The Way. I'm Wendy Grace. Well, joined with me in studio to discuss a really invaluable resource for those who are preparing for marriage, but also those who are married, to tell us about the work of Accord. I've got with me in studio Tony Shanahan. Tony, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Okay, so for those who haven't heard about Accord, tell us a little bit about it.
So Accord is in its 63rd year now, and it actually has origins going back to the end of the Second World War, when soldiers were coming back from the front and family situations were difficult for a whole variety of reasons. Women had started going out to work during the war effort and they were more independent, and men were coming back traumatized as well. So the family situations were really stretched and strained. So there was an organization set up called the National Marriage Advisory Council, and the Catholic Church also set up the National Catholic Marriage Advisory Council, and that eventually evolved and became known as Accord. And it came to Ireland in 1962 in Belfast, and then it spread throughout the country. So there's an Accord office, or at least one Accord office, essentially in every diocese in the country.
So that's really interesting about the origins, in terms of it was really about supporting marriages through ups and downs. Because most people, if they know about Accord, they'll think probably just of the marriage preparation courses, which are really important. Tell us a little, we'll start with that and then we'll talk about some of the other work.
Yeah.
What does the course entail? What sort of tools does it give couples preparing for marriage?
Okay, well, Accord has been providing marriage preparation courses for decades, almost as long as Accord has been in existence. And it became mandatory back in the 70s, I think, where the church said, you know, if you want to do sacramental marriage, you have to have a preparation for it, as indeed you have to for every other sacrament in reality. So they set about defining the criteria that needed to be covered. Obviously, the meaning of sacramental marriage itself, the vows, the covenant, etc., but also practical things like family of origin and communication and conflict resolution and intimacy and parenthood and everything you would expect that makes a relationship function. Now, of course, the thing is that when people are in love and getting married, they think that, you know, it's all sunshine and roses and it's going to be happy ever after. The truth is, it can be. It's just different from how the fairy tales would have it. So we set out to provide people with knowledge and tools and an experience of working with each other so that when relationships hit a bump in the road, as they inevitably will, they have something to fall back on, to think about and to work their way through it. And also they know, because they'll have been told about it in our preparation course, that if they need more intensive help, we also have the counselling service.
What sort of feedback are you getting from couples then?
Well, I'm pleased to say that the couple feedback from the pre-marriage course is outstanding. I mean, virtually 100% satisfaction. Occasionally you'll get people who say, oh, it could have been done quicker, or I knew all about it anyway, but that's very rare. Most people would say it was so much better than they imagined, and they're so glad they did it, and they'd recommend it wholeheartedly to all of their
They're
friends.
surprised because maybe they thought, oh, this is something I have to do, rather than, oh, I've come away with some really good tools for
Exactly.
my marriage.
Exactly, yeah. And also, for a lot of people, they even find out in the course of the weekend itself, they learn more about each other, and that brings them closer together as well. I remember reading one particular piece of feedback where the woman said, I didn't think it was possible to love my fiance more, but I love him so much more now after this weekend. And that's because people are guided towards a process whereby there's some self-reflection, there's some joint work where they, you know, reflect with each other, and there's some group work, but most of it is individual and couple work, and nobody is put in a position where they have to share anything publicly that they'd rather not share. But it means that things that people maybe realize or maybe don't realize they should have been talked about, should have been talking to each other about, but haven't, they now have the opportunity to do so.
They're given the time and space because life is so busy. Preparing for a wedding is really busy, and
That's it.
you can often say, wow, you're spending so much time on the one day, but you've got a whole lifetime together to work on after that.
That's right. And most of the time people will find that their values are actually more closely aligned than they had imagined, because they hadn't talked about it. Very occasionally, very, very occasionally. You find a couple that wasn't aligned at all and hadn't talked about it. Like, for instance, children. Like, one partner had decided that they weren't going to have children, but they hadn't been talked about. And it's the first time that the other partner has discovered this. So then they've got a real decision to make. Are we still going to
What's the
get
path
married or
forward?
not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what about then just kind of ongoing support for couples then, Tony? Because like you say, marriage, it's great, but it's not easy and there's ups and downs and every couple will face different challenges. And I often think of the analogy of, we will service our car every year when we have X amount of kilometers on it, but we might actually not put that time and space into our marriages.
Yeah.
What exists to support couples as they're on the journey together?
Well, I think that everybody brings their best selves into the relationship to start with as they're courting and so on. And then they make a decision, this is the right person for me. We're going to settle down and have a family. And then gradually the pressures of work and the pressures of parenthood and maybe extended family obligations and so on, all of these things creep into the couple space. And imperceptibly, some couples can start to grow apart, or they can start to take each other for granted. They don't intend to take each other for granted, but they come to a point whereby one of them, either the male or the female, thinks, well, my views aren't being taken into account any longer. And the purpose of counselling fundamentally is to help people be true to themselves, get, re-establish a sense of their own values and share the values with their partner. Fundamentally, it boils down to, rather than saying, I think, to my partner all the time, it's a case of I feel. And when you have a conversation around I feel, it's a completely different dynamic. You can be disagreeing forever in a day if it's an I think conversation. But if it's an I feel conversation, it's more of, oh, I didn't think you would feel like that. Let's
Because you're not
discuss
pointing the
that.
finger.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
And, most of the time, people can compromise or they can get a different perspective. That sometimes that different perspective means, okay, I didn't understand that. Now I understand that. Happy to do things your way. Or sometimes it's give and take. Sometimes it's compromise. Sometimes it's agreeing to differ. Sometimes it's easier to agree to differ because you feel you've been heard. You realize that your partner understands your perspective, understands how you feel about something, and it's easier to live with on that basis, because it means that next time round it may go the other way. But I think that the main thing about counselling really is keeping that bond of intimacy together and stripping away the layers that may have clouded it.
Yeah, because sometimes, you'll hear couples who say, I know where we were, I'm not sure how we got here, or situations where cracks can become crevices if you don't try to address them and you don't try to really address maybe issues that are going on.
Yeah.
Do you think there's still a stigma around counseling, or kind of younger generations more kind of aware of, no, everything in my life requires work and effort and kind of ongoing learning as well?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think that depending on where you are and the age range, some people can see it as a stigma, a sense of failure, if you like, or they don't want to admit to people that they need help in this particular area. Whereas it's quite common nowadays, especially the younger generation, to be talking about their mental health or taking counselling for anxiety or depression and things like that. And certainly the younger generation will often come to counselling saying, we want tools to help us do better. So they see it as a challenge, like many challenges, and how do we address this challenge? And it is often true to say as well that one partner will say, we should go for counselling because they think they have the answers and they're looking for the counsellor to support them. But actually they find, somewhat to their surprise, that each person in the relationship is treated equally. And that is part of the skill of a relationship counsellor, that you can hold both persons' point of view with due respect and engage with them empathetically, so that it's never the case in counselling that you get criticised or you get judged or you get told what to do. Counselling works because you're in a safe space and you're free to say how you feel and the things that are on your mind and so on. And most of the time, it's a bit like the pre-marriage course. You're hearing your partner's point of view. And often, people, I've been saying that for years. And they say, yeah, but I didn't hear it until now. Now I hear it. Now I understand it. Now I see it differently.
Yeah, and it's kind of an eye-opening moment
Yeah.
for couples in that sense.
Yeah.
Finally, just to ask you, Tony, for couples who are maybe engaged, preparing for marriage, what would your advice be to them in terms of encouraging them to engage with the pre-marriage course like the Accord one?
I think it's pretty essential. I mean, in my own case, I'm married 44 years this year. I didn't do a pre-marriage course. They weren't obligatory when we were doing them, but I did have plenty of priests and nuns in the family who were indirectly involved in counselling or religious life, obviously. So I remember one uncle telling me to read The Joy of Loving, a book by Eric Fromm, which we did, and then somebody else recommended Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled, things like that. So that was kind of our marriage preparation, plus our own families of origin. But I do think that with the advances in adult education, with the advances in psychology and so on, we're able to make it much simpler for people. And it's not necessarily the case that one size fits all, but that's kind of the beauty of it. Everybody can find their own individual path, and this is just a step on that journey.
Well, thank you so much just for giving us a little bit of an insight into so much of the good work that Accord is doing in terms of supporting couples preparing for marriage, those who are married, helping them on that journey, and giving them, as you say, the practical tools to really the ultimate goal is to have healthy, happy, loving marriages.
Absolutely.
And
And a happy relationship or a contented relationship is one where the children have the best chance of flourishing. And families that are troubled, i.e., couples that are troubled, generally it has adverse
yeah, there's the
consequences for
ripple
the
effect.
children. Yeah,
So,
adverse childhood experiences, as they call them. So it's good for the couples, it's good for their children, it's good for society.
well, thank you so much for being with us on the way today. It's been great to have Tony Shanahan of Accord. And thank you so
Thank you.
much for being with us. And of course, you can connect up with all the work that Accord is doing by heading to their website. And thanks for being with us today.